Hello everyone, my name is Carissa Boussier. This is History 201 with Professor Martin. My presentation today is on women's suffrage and the Declaration of Sentiments and Resolutions of 1848. The main points I would like to cover today are the importance of the Seneca Falls Convention, the Declaration of Sentiments, the importance of the leaders of the movement, the emerging women's associations, as well as the amendments that had taken place. So before the Seneca Falls Convention, Elizabeth Cady Stanton and Lucretia Mott had both been at the 1840 World Anti-Slavery Convention in London, where they had met, and because of the intent that American women were there to vote and serve on committees or even speak at the convention, they were taken to a section that was out of the view of men, so mostly like all women's area. This did not go well with Elizabeth Stanton or Lucretia Mott, so they came together and they plotted a convention of their own to address the state of women. This convention, that was known as the Seneca Falls Convention, was held in Seneca Falls, New York, and lasted 2 days with more than 300 women and men attending in 1848. Elizabeth Stanton had read a document that her and others like Lucretia Mott, Martha Wright, Jane Hunt, and Mary McClintock had come up with while discussing their struggles over tea. Stanton and McClintock spent 8 days drafting up the Declarations of Sentiments. They had used the Declaration of Independence as a guide and a statement on the equality of women. This declaration included 16 demands, including the right of education, the right to own property, and the right to vote in public elections. After a strong debate, almost not passing, the women's right to vote was endorsed. Not long after the convention, it had become a doctrine of the movement. As time went by, Susan B. Anthony and Elizabeth Stanton had formed a partnership with one another on the abolishment of slavery and for women's rights. In 1866, Susan B. Anthony and Elizabeth Stanton had organized the 11th National Women's Rights Convention, which the convention had voted in transforming into the American Equal Rights Association that had planned to campaign for the equal rights to all citizens. The members were made up of mostly activists in the women's rights and abolitionist movements, with Lucretia Mott, Lucy Stone, and Frederick Douglass leading the way. When the amendment for the 15th Amendment was being implicated, which declared that the right to vote cannot be denied to any citizen of the United States because of race, color, or a previous condition of servitude, the American Equal Right Association had split into two parties, with the Equal Rights Association being split into two parties. One was known as the National Women's Suffrage Association, led by Susan B. Anthony and Elizabeth Stanton, that started May 15, 1869. They believed women and black men be enfranchised at the same time, whereas the other group, the American Women's Suffrage Association, led by Lucy Stone, Antoinette Blackwell, Julia Howe, and Frederick Douglass, was willing for black men to achieve what was known as the Negro Hour, and female suffrage could wait. After ratification of the 15th Amendment passing in 1870, the two groups had worked at different levels. The National Women's Suffrage Association, also known as NWSA, was mostly at the national level, where the meetings that had taken place were for all, whereas the American Women's Suffrage Association known as the AWSA, worked on the same goal only at a state level, where only delegates from recognized state organizations were able to vote at the meetings. This conflict between the two went on until 1890, when the two associations merged to form the National American Women's Suffrage Association. Each of these women were really important in this movement. The leaders who fought for women's rights: Elizabeth Cady Stanton, Susan B. Anthony, Lucy Stone, Lucretia Mott, and also Frederick Douglass helped as well. Of these leaders, Susan B. Anthony would be arrested for violating the 14th Amendment, which guaranteed the right to vote to any of the male inhabitants of the U.S. over 20 years of age. Not being able to take the stand in her own defense and being sentenced to pay a $100 fine, which she declined to do, challenged the judge to hold her in custody and put her in jail. In doing so, Judge Hunt declined, knowing that this would allow Susan B. Anthony to appeal her case to the U.S. Supreme Court. With her case being closed, she had earned widespread respect and inspired many young women to help ensure that her cause would eventually achieve about 14 years after her death. Many people thought that the women's movement and their sympathizers were being ridiculous, and the articles from the newspapers had criticized the women for being unfeminine and immoral for pushing such rights. In 1913, the day before Woodrow Wilson's inauguration in Washington, D.C., Alice Paul and Lucy Burns organized a parade promoting women's suffrage. This parade had brought out 5,000 women and brought the issue front and center to the national news. The two women formed Congressional Union, which later turned into the National Women's Party, whose intent was to get Congress to pass a women's voting bill. Although they were unsuccessful in 1916 elections, in 1919, the U.S. Congress had finally passed the 19th Amendment. With the 19th Amendment, women's rights to vote, in 1920, Tennessee had become 36th state to ratify the 19th Amendment, making sure that the amendment be guaranteed for a woman's right to vote would be adopted into the U.S. Constitution. With the final vote, the State House by 49 to 47, the decisive vote was casted by Harry Byrne, who at the time was 24 years old. He originally was going to vote against it, though he was persuaded by the letter from his mother urging him to be a good boy and vote for the ratification. In conclusion, I believe it is important to know the history of how these women fought so hard for us to be where we are today, to have these opportunities to receive an education, to be able to vote, and to own property, and to have the equality that we do have with men. Also knowing that these opportunities came from numbers, not just one woman, to make this happen. I wanted to thank you all so much for listening and wish you all well and have a great summer. Thank you.